I sure hope you watched the Doilies Part 1, because if you didn't, this won't make any sense.
You know, as long as I'm all set up here to do these walnut pieces, I may as well do the purple heart and the mahogany as well at the same time. Okay, now as you can see, these are nice and rounded. This will be the front of the frame. This will be what will be facing people.
I think I mentioned in one of my other videos that when I'm thinking about something, I gotta work on it. Well, I've been thinking about that poor doily that was stuck under that dirty old flower pot. Now up here on this end, it's not supposed to look like that. It's supposed to look like this end. I don't know what leaked there, but when I took it off, it was actually crispy. Well, what I did was I soaked it in some water for about 3 or 4 hours with a little tiny bit of Javex. And I think whatever it was, I got it out. Here the doily is still wet, and I have it spread out on a clean piece of glass to dry. Hopefully it'll dry nice and flat. Unfortunately, it's not as good as it was when Grandma had just finished it, but at least it's a lot better than it was, and I think it will be worth mounting. I think this is the end that was in such bad shape. Or is it this end? It's kind of hard to tell. I guess that's a good sign. Okay, now while I'm waiting for that doily to dry out on that piece of glass, I may as well finish up rounding over these frame parts. Get them ready so I can cut the corners. Make a frame. I think I've got enough pieces cut now that I can make 3 or 4, maybe 5 small frames. You know, I should mention that I'm making this video as I go along. You're seeing the different aspects of this project as they happen, not in a re-edited version to make it more logical. Sorry about that.
This nail is about 155 thousandths of an inch in diameter. This little pin is about 20 thousandths. And this drill, about 46 thousandths. Now, and by the way, that's not the smallest drill I've got. I've got one that's about the same size as that pin. Watch what I'm going to do. Now the plan is I want to drill a little hole about, not quite half an inch down this nail. Maybe just 1/4 of an inch.
Now I know that this drill press is way too big for this kind of thing, but if I'm careful here, it should work out. And I guess you camera buffs out there can tell I got the ISO really cranked. It's at 6400 right now.
Okay, I don't know if you can see it or not, but that little hole is not dead center on the nail, but that's okay. Another thing is, it might be just a little bit too deep, but I can always grind the nail down a little bit and that'll effectively shorten the hole. Now, put this magnet on. You'll notice that I've cut the pin in half.
My fingers sure aren't as nimble as they used to be.
Now the magnet is on the end of the nail, so it'll hold the pin in, so the pin won't fall out. Now the idea is, I can take and I can push the pin into something, and then just leave it there. Now you're probably already thinking, I think I know what he was going to do with all this.
And as the popular saying goes, yippers, I'll be using this neat little tool when I get all those frames made at the end of this project. Now the router did leave some burn marks, but they did come out okay. Okay, I admit it. It was a little harder to sand than I thought. Ended up using the electric. Okay, what I'm hoping to do here is to cut off as little as possible, and that way the frame is going to be as large as possible. You can hear the cutoff getting sucked into the dust collector. There, starting to shape up a little bit. Now I remember that I did say at the end of video part 1 that the next time you see one of these doilies it'll be in a frame. Well, as I said, I'm making this video as I go along. Well, 24 hours has passed now, and this doily is perfectly dry, and it didn't shrink. Now I found 2 more doilies that needed to be rinsed out. This one here had coffee stains on it. That was too bad. I think I've got it upside down. I think this is supposed to be on the underside, but that's alright. And this little guy here, I think it was under a plant, because it was actually a little bit muddy right here. Yeah, it looks better this side up. Okay, we'll see what that looks like in 24 hours. You know, the more I work on these doilies, the more impressed I am with all the work Grandma must have gone to make them. In all likelihood, I'm going to be using 1/4-inch plywood for the back. So that means that I have to rabbet out this little corner here so that the plywood will recess just a little bit into it. About 1/4 of an inch in maybe, and then of course 1/4 of an inch up to accommodate the plywood. And I'll be using this bit right here. Now you'll notice here that the plywood actually goes down into the groove a little bit more than the width of the plywood, but that's to allow for the poster board that it's going to go on. And the poster board I'm estimating is going to be about that thick. So I think it's going to be just about right. So okay, now let's get this little frame all glued together. Normally I don't use epoxy glue if I'm going to be doing any staining or anything, but if I'm going to be using, like say, the Rabbeting, the epoxy glue isn't even going to show up. It'll change the color of the wood, the same as the Rabbeting. Another thing I found about epoxy glue is that after a few days it starts to get brittle. And I don't know if it's more brittle than, say, the Tite Bond 3 that I've been using, but it does get brittle and those joints could easily snap. So I will be using splines as well. That'll probably be the next step after I remove the excess glue here.